You clicked for one reason. Your net worth feels stuck. Here's the truth no one tells you. Wealth doesn't accelerate until you cross 3 hidden points, and most people quit right before the first one flips from tiny percentages into dollars that actually cover bills. Today, I'll show you how to survive the boring phase and hit the exact threshold that makes compounding finally matter. We'll break down why the first $100,000 is the hardest, how it turns 10% from pocket change into real money, and what to do this month to move faster. Miss this, and the other 2 acceleration points never happen. Let's talk about why it feels impossible at first. Here's what makes the first $100,000 feel impossible. The work is real, but the results look invisible. You set the transfers, buy the fund, and your balance wiggles and stalls, almost mocking the effort. That's the trap that convinces people to stop right before the moment when returns start showing up as dollars you can actually use. You feel it month to month. You cut eating out, push a little overtime, drop $500 into an index fund, and your account reads like a slow news day. Some months it's up to $120, next month it's down to $90. You're doing everything right, but nothing seems to move the needle in a way you can feel in real life. You keep hearing that compounding is magic. Meanwhile, 10% on $1,000 is $100. That's a tire rotation, not a life upgrade. Here's the real issue. Returns show up as percentages. Your life bills you in dollars. Rent, groceries, childcare, those numbers don't care that your account grew by 8%. Early on, the base is so small that even good returns can't dent real expenses. It's not that your strategy is weak, it's that your base is tiny. Think of heating water. From room temperature up to just below the boiling point, it looks unchanged to the eye. The molecules are accelerating, but nothing dramatic happens on the surface. Then, at 100 degrees Celsius, the system hits a critical threshold and behavior changes. Investing works the same way. For a long stretch, progress looks flat, and then you reach a point where the same percentage starts throwing off dollars you can actually use. There's also a mind game working against you. We tend to think in straight lines. We expect each month to add the same amount, so the early years feel like a grind with no payoff. On a small balance, the curve is technically exponential, but it behaves like a staircase with tiny steps. Present bias pulls you towards spending now instead of feeding the base. Loss aversion nudges you to sell on a red month, locking in setbacks that slow momentum. That's why people bail during the boring stage and miss the bend in the curve. Let's ground it in consistent behavior instead of perfect forecasts. If you keep contributing, say a steady few $100s a month, and earn average market returns over time, the first several years will feel dominated by your deposits. The growth shows up, but it mostly hides inside the total. Stick with it, and the ratio flips. Contributions become the smaller part, and growth does more of the heavy lifting. This shift takes patience more than precision. And you're not the exception. Even Warren Buffett spent decades stacking before compounding made him look brilliant. More than 99% of his net worth came after age 50, not because he suddenly found a new trick, but because a large base met time. The early stage is universal. The boredom is universal. The payoff is too. So the question becomes, how big does the base need to be before 8 to 10% stops feeling like a shrug and starts touching real bills? There is a clear first target where the math begins to matter in your monthly life. Here's where it becomes concrete. The $100,000 threshold is the first point where average returns start feeling like part of your monthly budget instead of a statistic. What if 10% could cover a month of rent? It can, once your base is big enough to matter. That's why the first compounding trigger is clear and measurable. Get $100,000 invested. At that point, percentages stop feeling like trivia and start showing up as dollars that handle real life. The goal isn't a trophy number, it's to cross the line where growth begins to participate in your budget instead of just decorating a chart. Now, $100,000 sounds distant when you're starting at a small balance. That distance makes people slow contributions or pause investing during dull months. The path looks long because the early years rely mostly on your deposits, but the math changes once the base is bigger. 10% on $100,000 is $10,000 a year. For illustration, that averages to about $833 a month if you spread annual returns over 12 months. Even though markets don't pay in equal monthly chunks unless you use structured income. That covers a chunk of rent in many cities, or it knocks out groceries and a utility bill with room to spare. Returns at that level aren't theoretical, they're usable. You see the same principle in the careers of investors who stayed in the game long enough for compounding to work on a large base. The breakthrough wasn't a secret trade, it was time, consistency, and a base big enough that average returns translated into large dollar gains. That's the shift you're aiming for. Make average returns feel meaningful. So how do you reach $100,000 faster? Squeeze 3 levers at once. Increase your savings rate by simplifying a handful of categories. Then lock the difference into an automatic transfer on payday. Add a side income stream dedicated solely to investments, freelance hours, weekend resales, a seasonal gig. And don't leave match money on the table. Employer contributions shorten the timeline in a way salary cuts alone can't. Even a modest match can shave years off your march to 6 figures. Lay out a paced plan so it feels concrete. Contribute $1,000 a month and commit future 3% raises straight to your investments. At an average return of 8 to 10%, that cadence can reach 6 figures in roughly 6 to 7 years in favorable conditions, though actual timelines vary widely with markets and consistency. Treat this as an example, not a prediction. Keep the throttle steady and the timeline tightens with each bump in income you route to the account instead of lifestyle creep. Use micro milestones to keep your motivation funded. At $10,000, 10% is $1,000 a year, about $83 a month. At $25,000, it's $2,500 a year, $208 a month. At $50,000, you're at $5,000 a year, $416 a month. Cross $100,000 and you're at $10,000 a year, $833 a month. These are average annual returns broken into monthly figures to visualize impact. Markets won't pay evenly, but the scale shift is real. When you break $100,000, something clicks psychologically. Growth stops feeling like a rumor and starts covering pieces of real expenses. That's your cue to start assigning those dollars to specific costs, one bill at a time. When growth starts to touch everyday life, the next move is straightforward. Let assets do the paying. Let assets pay your bills, the first taste of freedom. Trigger 2 is simple. Let assets replace slices of your monthly expenses. You don't need to be a millionaire to feel it. The goal isn't to cover everything at once, it's to retire one bill, then another, building visible momentum. Each expense covered is an hour of life bought back. And when an asset picks up an expense you used to cover with labor, your salary shifts from survival money to surplus. That mental shift reduces stress and increases control. Passive income can feel distant when you're building your base, but it's not an all-or-nothing move. Start with micro wins that are boring on purpose. A small dividend portfolio that knocks out groceries. A high-yield savings account that reliably covers streaming, cloud storage, and your news apps. A modest rental that pays the electric and water. These are small, repeatable outcomes that teach your brain a new habit. Assign cash flow to a job, then keep scaling. Here's a grounded example. Park $50,000 in diversified dividend stocks yielding 3 to 4% and you're looking at roughly $1,500 to $2,000 a year in cash flow. Dividends are not guaranteed and can be cut or suspended, so diversification and quality screens matter. If your yield runs lower, say closer to 2 to 2.5%, that still pays for subscriptions or a portion of food. The point isn't to chase the highest yield, it's to build dependable cash that maps to a real expense and can grow with reinvestment. A rental can play the same role, with more moving parts. True cash flow is the rent minus the mortgage, taxes, insurance, maintenance, and vacancies. Underwrite conservatively. Stress test for longer vacancies and higher repairs, and leave a cash cushion. Property management, local laws, and unexpected expenses can change the math, so only count what consistently lands in your account. When the numbers hold, the surplus can take a utility bill off your plate every month and still leave room to reinvest. Now, the flywheel. Once an asset covers a bill, your paycheck no longer has to. Redirect those freed dollars into investments on autopilot. That increases your base, which increases next year's income, which frees up another bill. Step by step, you move from trading hours for money to letting money work harder than you. This is how you get escape velocity from a salary-dependent lifestyle. Salary funds assets, assets fund bills, and the loop tightens with every increment. Build an easy system. Earmark each asset's cash flow to a specific bill and label it in your budget. Track which bills are owned by assets on a simple dashboard: groceries, phone, internet, utilities. Reinvest any overflow back into the same asset or the next target. The visible progress keeps motivation high and curbs lifestyle creep. As these pieces start running without constant effort, the next question isn't how to work harder, it's how to scale the machine that's doing the work. The next phase is about using bigger levers safely. Leverage without blowing up. Capital, systems, and networks. Acceleration doesn't come from pushing harder. It comes from scaling the machine that does the pushing. When your wealth engine stops depending on your hours and starts running on capital, systems, and connections, the output jumps without a matching jump in effort. That's trigger 3. You're no longer trying to squeeze more productivity out of yourself. You're designing a setup that amplifies every dollar and every decision with controlled power. Let's break down the 3 levers. Capital lets you control larger assets than your cash alone would allow. Systems and teams let results happen without you pressing every button. Networks open doors to deals, insights, and timing most people never see. Access to better opportunities, insider knowledge, and off-market deals the average person never gets to evaluate. Used together, they compound each other. Used blindly, they can bury you. The aim is smart leverage, increase upside while keeping risk contained. Start with capital leverage. You can use debt or reinvestment to step into bigger assets, but you need boundaries. Loan to value matters because it sets how much shock the asset can absorb before you owe more than it's worth. Track DSCR so cash flow comfortably covers debt service. Stress test for vacancies, rate resets, and price drops. Ask what happens if income falls 20% or if expenses rise 20%. Maintain cash reserves that cover ugly cases, not just the sunny ones. If the numbers only work under perfect conditions, you don't have a deal, you have a coin flip. Over-leverage turns small mistakes into wipeouts. 2008 was a global reminder of what happens when debt outruns cash flow and prices. Next, systems and teams. Document the repeatable tasks so they run the same way every time. Create simple, standard operating procedures, then delegate the execution and automate what a tool can do better than a person. Your role shifts to design, audit, and improvement. The standard becomes, can this process deliver the same or better result without me touching it this week? If not, tighten it until it can. That's how outputs keep scaling when your calendar doesn't. Now, networks. Access compounds faster than capital. The right contacts surface off-market opportunities, alert you to risks early, and share playbooks you didn't even know existed. Bring value first, data, introductions, or execution capacity, so the relationship has a reason to persist. Over time, you stop competing in crowded auctions and start negotiating in quiet rooms where the math works because terms, timing, and diligence are better. You've seen this at scale with Amazon's reinvestment flywheel, reinvesting every dollar of profit back into growth until it dominated entire industries. Systems made systems. Capital funded the next loop. Network effects improved terms and reach. The lesson isn't to copy their size, it's to copy the principle. Reinvest cash flow into the bottleneck that increases throughput, then repeat. Protect the downside with a simple risk playbook. Keep a margin of safety on every deal. Diversify by cash flow source, not just by asset label. Track DSCR and LTV, set minimums you won't cross, keep real reserves, and run scenarios quarterly. If your plan only works in one set of conditions, you don't have a plan. You know the levers and the guardrails. Now it's time to force momentum and get your base moving immediately. Let's translate those levers into daily moves that build habits you can keep. Your 30-day plan to survive the boring phase. Compounding won't rescue you if you never make it to the switch. The next 30 days are about forcing momentum so your base grows whether the market cooperates or not. Treat it like a sprint designed to install permanent systems. 1 month where you prioritize savings rate, raise your investable cash, and lock processes in place that continue without you micromanaging them. Here's the plan. For 30 days, your goal is simple. Increase the dollars that hit your investment every single month. You'll do it by cutting waste, topping up income, and capturing free money that's sitting on the table. None of this is forever. You push now to earn a lasting increase in your compounding base. Expect some discomfort. Cutting costs feels annoying. Extra work takes energy, but the trade is clear. A short, focused push that improves your finances every month after. Start with an audit and kill 3 low ROI expenses today. Open your card statements and tag every recurring charge. Nuke what you barely use. Stale subscriptions, overlapping services, inflated plans. Call your insurer and internet provider and ask for the current promotional rate. Switch if they stonewall. Decide on a dining out cap for 30 days. Total the savings and set an automatic transfer for that amount to your investment account on payday. Do not wait to see what's left. Move it first so the change is structural, not temporary. Now add a quick income boost dedicated solely to investments. Pick one channel you can execute this week, a freelance task using a skill you already have, a weekend of overtime, or a resale sweep of unused items in your home. List everything in one afternoon and price to sell. Route every dollar to your brokerage or retirement account as a separate, named transfer. Label matters because you want a clear link. Extra effort equals extra shares. Capture free money next. If you have a 401k with a match, set your contribution to the level that earns the full match. That's an immediate lift to your base because it's essentially free money that accelerates your timeline to the first threshold. Open or upgrade to a high-yield savings account for your emergency fund so idle cash earns a competitive APY. Max the tax efficiency you can handle. Prioritize Roth IRAs and 401ks within your budget so more of your growth compounds without drag. Build a visual tracker so progress stays visible. Draw 4 rungs: $10,000, $25,000, $50,000, $100,000. Under each, write the monthly dollar impact of a 10% annual return. This makes abstract percentages concrete, anchors motivation during the boring phase, and reinforces that every deposit moves you closer to dollars you can actually use. Set a small reward tied to each milestone, a one-time purchase or experience with a fixed cap. You're training yourself to recognize the boring wins. Assign an asset to a specific bill within 90 days. Target the easiest to replace: groceries, internet, or subscriptions. Use dividends, interest, or side hustle profits to cover it and label that bill owned by assets in your budget. Redirect the paycheck dollars that used to pay it straight back into investments. By day 30, your monthly investable cash is higher, transfers are automatic, and your base starts working with you. Keep feeding it. This is how average returns begin to show up as bills paid instead of numbers on a chart. So let's close with the one target that organizes everything. Conclusion. The first $100,000 isn't just a milestone, it's when compounding turns abstract percentages into tangible dollars that handle rent, groceries, and other real expenses. That moment proves the system is working because your base finally carries weight. From there, each percent has a job and your budget feels lighter. Act now. Pick one bill to retire with assets and set an automated contribution today. Automation keeps you consistent long enough for the switch to flip, and the bill target keeps you focused. Next, we'll break down the exact systems to scale from $100,000 to your first million without adding more hours and without relying on luck.